Default team, it's me, Robin Fennig, coming to you from Sacramento, California. When you started Ultiworld and started the podcast, man, I was a very unrefined player and somehow made it to be Club Player of the Year not once, but twice in 2019 and 2022 in 2 different divisions. I don't know what you guys are thinking sometimes, but thank you. But I have to say, my favorite episode was when Charlie said he would eat a shoe if Noise won Nationals. I'm really bummed that didn't happen because talk about some podcast content that could have been. It was very motivating, though, to train super hard. It's too bad that we took 16th, but the world may never know whose shoe you were going to eat, except for Noise. Congrats. Enjoy it. I'm looking forward to 500 more episodes.
Hey, Charlie and Keith. It's Cody Mills, coach of Cal Poly Slow and New York Pony. Congratulations on 500 episodes of Deep Look. You guys have kept me entertained in the car on many an early morning down to San Luis Obispo. Thanks for everything you do for the community, and thanks for every time you've beaten us in the fields in a pick'em contest. Congratulations.
All right, episode number 500. Episode 1 of Deep Look came back on November 25th, 2012. It was me and Wes Cronk. Wes Cronk joined us for episode 400 a couple years ago. And now here we are, Keith, at number 500. It is Keith Rayner alongside Charlie Eisenhood. Keith, it's pretty crazy to think about the fact that we've gotten to 500 episodes of Frisbee talk.
It's too many. We got to cut back. We've done too much. I don't even know if I listened to the show before. I don't even remember you asking me to come on the show, to be honest. Like, I don't even remember how
it's been a long time, Keith. I think we've done at least 400 shows together, probably more.
For sure.
We'd have to go back and look, but Wes was on the show with me for about a year, and then you took over. Man, crazy. 500. Excited to be here. We've got our college championships qualifiers in the books, and we're going to get into all of the regionals action from weekend number 2. We got to talk about predicted seedings. There's some really interesting conversations to have as we await the official post-regionals rankings from USA Ultimate. And we'll, of course, get to our question of the week as well. But first, Keith, it's time for our trivia question of the week.
All right. So this week's trivia question of the week is I wanted to do because I kind of wanted to honor the folks whose seasons may have ended, but there's definitely still superstars out there. We've gotten a couple of questions here and there in the Discord about players who could be top players who didn't make it to the college championships. So I went back. I got a list of all of the All-Americans, all the players who were selected as All-Americans whose teams did not qualify for nationals the years that they were selected as All-Americans. Now that excludes BYU, although I have that list too. And obviously 2020 when we didn't have nationals because that year everybody. But other than that, we've been doing the awards since I think 2014 was our first year doing the All-American teams. So I've got the list. There are 9 players who fit the criteria. They were selected as All-Americans in a year they did not qualify for the college championship. So Charlie, I'm going to give you a chance to think about, is there anybody that jumps out right away that you're like, oh, well, I definitely remember this one?
No, I need time. This is a hard one. This is the hardest trivia question that we've had so far.
Oh, I got Charlie. I got Charlie stuff. Folks in the chat, start thinking about yours. Top players in the college season who didn't make it to the college championships. We'll see who got selected. And I'll tell y'all, there are a few of them who are way back near the beginning of the Ultiworld history. Now, while we take a break to let Charlie think, we're going to talk about our friends over at Sunset Lakes. Now, Sunset Lakes, originally a dairy farm, they're producing milk and cream for Ben & Jerry's. And then in 2019, they diversified and started growing hemp. They focus on providing high-quality products at a fair price. They're majority employee-owned, use sustainable farming practices, and they cut out middlemen to help make their products affordable. Just the other night, I had to sleep on the couch behind me down in the basement as my toddler kicked me out in the middle of the night, once again, out of my bed, So I popped a couple of Sunset Lake CBD sleep gummies, and not only did I get a good night's rest, but the best part is that when I woke up, I was like clear-headed. I was ready to get up, which is great because my kid's running around upstairs screaming his head off. I don't know why at 6 a.m. he's like raring to go, but I can't wake up with that groggy, you're like basically like hungover feeling you get sometimes when you take stuff to help you sleep or stuff that puts you to sleep. None of that. Clear-headed. I was ready to go. Now you can check out Sunset Lakes today at sunsetlakecbd.com. Use our coupon code DEEPLOOK. Let them know we sent you, and you'll get 20% off on your order. That's all one word, Deep Look. Get yourself some sleep gummies or some of their other great products. Farmer-owned, Vermont-grown Sunset Lake CBD. All right, back to our trivia question. Charlie, you think you can name any of our All-Americans who did not qualify for nationals the year they were selected for the All-American teams?
Gosh, this is so tough. The person who came to my mind first, Keith, was Parker Bray, because I think there was a year that Georgia missed nationals and he was amazing. Am I right?
That's correct. You're 1 for 1.
Yes.
2017, okay. Parker Bray, University of Georgia.
To be honest, I've had a really hard time coming up with other names. I'm trying to think if there was years where, so like,
think about the most famous.
Bansfield,
like, what are the craziest regionals upsets? Think about those ones because those teams are represented here.
I was thinking the year Johnny Bansfield and James Highsmith were really good. I think they made nationals, and there was only the one season, so they would have been at nationals. Man, craziest upsets. I'd have to go back to maybe thinking like Minnesota losing when they were the number 1 team in the country to Iowa and getting knocked out. I don't remember if we were doing AA at that time and if they had somebody who stood out enough. I don't really remember specific players from that team, so that's probably not right. Carleton's had some pretty big upset losses at regionals. Joe White. It's got to be Joe White.
Joe White's a good guess. You're correct that it is a Carleton player in that year in 2019 when they missed nationals. That's a wild year. There were 4 players, including a BYU player. So there were 3 players who were on this list in 2019. And not Joe White. We got some Joe White guesses. There's another different Carleton player.
They missed nationals that year, right?
Mm-hmm. They did.
So how is Joe White not one of the answers?
It's a different Carleton player.
But you're telling me that Joe White didn't make All-American that season?
He might have been hurt. Is possible something like that happened.
Yeah, I remember he didn't play that much, but that's crazy. 2019 Carleton. I'm having a hard time remembering players. I think Alex Olson was already gone.
I think that's right.
Stan Birdsong. I don't know. I'm going to just need you to give a list of players because I'm going to sit here and struggle for 10 minutes otherwise. Dylan Lanier. That makes sense.
Another big upset that year was UMass.
Star
player Tanner Johnson.
Sure.
He made the team. And then this is a strange one. The only player in the history of Johns Hopkins to be selected as an All-American.
Oh, that's the year Gabe Hernandez went out there. Yeah, that was awesome.
Gabe Hernandez gets the call that year. And then also in the men's division, 2015, Tyler Chan, and 2014, Eli Kearns from UC Davis.
Yeah, that's too deep in the archives for my brain.
Shout out to AK for getting the Dylan Lanier pick in the chat. In the women's division, you mentioned Minnesota. There is a Minnesota on the list, which is 2016 Sarah Ancio, a player who didn't really continue on to like a deep club career. So I think it's kind of been forgotten in some ways. So really an excellent player though at the time. 2015 Sheena Titcomb from Tufts also selected, and then 2014 Shelly Cohen from UNC selected. So those are your 9, excluding the BYU players, because there are a number of Jordan Kerr and Joe Mayer all both have selections as well. But
I honestly feel pretty good about getting 1. These were all so long ago.
Yeah, a lot of them ended up being. I thought you'd get Tanner Johnson.
I
I
could have
can
gotten
never
Tanner.
get
I
the
could have
image
gotten
of
Tanner
them
Johnson.
choking at regionals out of my head.
I could have gotten Tanner Johnson. All right, great stuff. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, college regionals recap time and seating conversation and more. Stay with us. It's episode number 500 of Deep Look.
Hi there, I'm Tina Titcomb. I play on Raleigh Radiance and Raleigh's Phoenix. My favorite part of the Deep Look podcast is when Charlie or Keith gets a prediction wrong, and then a team or maybe an individual kind of like proves that prediction wrong, and then it becomes a storyline. And the reason that I really love that is because it adds discourse and interesting things to the stories in Ultimate. So thanks so much for all you do, Charlie and Keith. 500 down and 500 to go.
Hey, this is Mitch Dangler, longtime USAU observer and almost as longtime listener to the Deep Look podcast. Just wanted to give a heartfelt congrats to Charlie, Keith, and all the people that put in the hard work to bring you the latest news, hot takes, and incorrect predictions on the college, club, and semi-pro scene. Every time I blow a big call, I can at least rest easy knowing I haven't missed as many calls as Charlie in the 2024 college season. But seriously, a big thanks to all you do for the sport. Nobody works harder in this community than the Ultiworld crew. Congrats on Deep Look episode number 500. Let me know when you get to 1,000.
I'm going to slander Mitch later.
Heads up, Breakmark now has sublimated 5-panel hat. You can get the hat and their famous reversible free with the purchase of one of their 3-piece team bundles, starting at just $85. Get all the details at breakmark.com.
Hey, this is Robin Fennig. One of the only things that we have to bring to an Ultimate tournament are our cleats. And every player has a cleat story, right? Mine took place in 2022 when Noise slayed our regional rival Dragon Thrust on Universe Point in a rainy semifinal at the USA Ultimate Club Championships. In my toe case, I didn't have to change a single thing about how I cut to get open for resets. I was so lost in the moment that I didn't even know it was Universe Point when I threw the game-winning huck to Dylan DeClerc. Toe cleats are specifically designed for Ultimate, with a cleat pattern for the game's sharp cuts and a durable, breathable, supportive build to keep your feet and ankles protected and comfortable for longer. That's why I've been using them for over 6 years. They're my best ally in the field. You put your best self on the field, so make sure you're bringing the best with you at tokeultimate.com. That's TOKAY-ultimate.com. Tokay, sky the limits.
Welcome back to Deep Look. It's time to talk about the second weekend of college regionals. But first, Keith, just give us the field. Who's playing at nationals this year? I want to hear all the teams. They get their moment in the sun, and I'm looking forward already to the matchups we're going to see in pool play.
Well, let's start in Division III, where we'll have the first college championships. So in Division III men's division, we will be seeing Richmond, Davenport, Rochester, Middlebury, Williams, Bates, St. Olaf, Carleton, Chop, Whitman, Lewis and Clark, Oberlin, Franciscan, OC, Oklahoma Christian, Missouri S&T, Barry, and Claremont. Shout out Bix from Oberlin and Calvin from Richmond from our squad. In the women's division, Richmond, Davenport, Wesleyan, Wellesley, Mount Holyoke, Middlebury, Squeakson, McAllister, Carleton, Eclipse, St. Olaf, Grinnell, Portland, Lewis and Clark, Haverford, and Bryn Mawr, Colorado College, Union, and Occidental. Division I men's, UNC, NC State, Michigan, Ottawa, Brown, UMass, Vermont, Minnesota, Carleton, Oregon, Oregon State, Penn State, Pittsburgh, Colorado, Texas, Wash U, Georgia, Cal Poly SLO, Cal, and of course, UAH, Alabama Huntsville. We just like we all predicted many years ago. Women's division, UNC, Michigan, SUNY Binghamton again, Vermont, Tufts, Carleton, UBC, Oregon, Western Washington, Victoria, Utah, UPenn, Colorado, and CSU, Georgia, Stanford, UCSB, UC San Diego, and UC Santa Cruz. Those are your college championships fields in 2024.
Absolutely love it. Thank you, Keith. And here's my overall takeaway. Okay. We'll talk about weekend 2 of regionals. We'll get specific, but basically there were no meaningful upsets. And what that means is that we have all of the best teams at nationals, and we have a lot of parity at the top, and we have the potential for an all-time great college championships. Because when you start to look ahead, Keith, to what we might see in the quarterfinals, tell me that you see obvious results in quarters. You know, when we go to club nationals a lot of the time, you look at the quarters matchups and you're like, we pretty much know what's going to happen here. And most of the time we see pretty chalky results. Now, that's not always true. Maybe less so recently, but a lot of the time that is the case. At this college nationals, how are you supposed to pick ahead of time? I mean, I think pools, we're going to see upsets. Pre-quarters, we're going to see upsets. Like the talent gap between the top teams and the middle of the pack is not that wide this year.
This is going to, people have been talking about in these little interstitial calls. There's been a lot of talks about us making predictions, often you getting them wrong. People giving you a hard time about it. And wow, I mean, this year is rife for predictions to go wrong because the chalk is not going to be obvious. Yeah, I think people are going to pick UNC and UMass and Vermont, and I expect a lot of that, but there's going to be a pretty good spread. It's not even clear to me exactly who the most popular pick will be in each division by the time we're coming down to the Beat Charlie Challenge and doing picks on the show. I'm not clear on who that's going to be. And you're going to be looking at teams that'll be the 6 or 7 or 8 seeds that might have legitimate claim to being title contenders. And I don't know if we've been in that spot before.
I absolutely love it. I'm so excited for college nationals, and more to come on our streaming plans, but more games than ever. We're doing the semis this year. I'm just so excited. Let's talk about this weekend's regionals, Keith. And I think we have to start with me getting to everybody coming into this 500 episode, giving us this little, I love it when Charlie's wrong. Well, how about when Charlie was right about Brown winning New England like they do every year? Death, taxes, Brown winning New England regionals in an upset. 15-11 over UMass. And I know Wyatt Kelman wasn't playing, and I know they were a little shorthanded, but at the end of the day, this Brown team, do you want to play them in nationals, Keith? Because I don't think I would.
Look, they got a good, honest win over UMass in the final. They beat Northeastern and McGill and dropped a game to UMass earlier in the regionals weekend. So it's not like the most incredible regionals performance we've ever seen or anything, but you can't deny in the final what they put together. And it was the culmination of, my fears going into that tournament was we just hadn't seen them turn it on at all. Like, they just had not turned it on in 2024. And to see that they have that gear still, that they have the fastball, like, that was vital to know what this team could be capable of at nationals, not just for us on the outside, but for them on the inside. Like, you don't want to show up to nationals not even knowing, hey, can we still throw our fastball? And they can't. So they're good call by you. I was just not ready to believe, and they proved me wrong.
I still think UMass has the higher ceiling, but Wyatt Kelman has missed a lot of time this season. Am I to believe that he's going to be 100% at nationals? I mean, I obviously hope so, but I am concerned because I think without him, UMass can't win a title. I don't think they have enough. But with him, I think that they have as good a shot as anybody. So what else? What else do you
Meanwhile,
want to talk about from
New-
this weekend, Keith?
Well, let's stay in New England for a second, because for
Sure.
a second it was I picked Vermont to finish second in the region. I said, I've been kind of downing this team all year, and I think that I'm ready to start, saying, hey, maybe their results are for real, and it's not, they're just playing hot. And I felt like I might look foolish after Saturday at regionals. They lose to Northeastern 13-11. They lose to McGill 13-12, and you're ringing the alarms for them. But they pull it out in the back door. They win 3 straight over Tufts, Northeastern, and McGill, mostly pretty confidently. Like, they beat Northeastern by 2, but it felt like that was basically the margin for most of the game. So they were able to fight off Northeastern in that game, and they get back to nationals. But they had me worried. I'm going to be a little scared of backing this team come nationals. I think the talent's there, but the inconsistency is also disconcerting.
Yeah, I think they had to earn it, though, to go through those 3 teams in the back door. Like, it's not like somebody got a shock upset and they got an easy game against a worse team. Like, those were the next 3 teams up. So, playing well when it counts is important, and a really nice bounce back, because it would have been easy to kind of choke. And they were in a game with Tufts there for a little bit. So, feels a little lucky that they got out unscathed, but they were clearly the 3rd best team in that region, if not the 2nd. Worth noting, Brown is 0-2 against Vermont this season. So a lot of parity at the top, perhaps, in that region. Let's see. On the women's side, Vermont and Tufts qualify in the New England region. No surprise there.
But not only do they qualify, remember when people were worried because Northeastern beat Tufts at conferences? And I said, we don't put too much stock in conferences.
You did
15-5 Tufts dumps on them. Remember, take that's my takeaway. What happened to UNC Wilmington, right? Like, in the men's division, these conference blips are mostly, I think, can be disregarded.
Out in the West, we had Northwest regionals, kind of crazy on both sides. Now, with the whole BYU situation, I guess when we recorded this show last week, it wasn't quite clear what was going to happen yet with BYU. In fact, you said that you thought BYU wasn't going to be playing at regionals. Well, not only did they play, I mean, we didn't have a final decision from USA Ultimate on how they were going to handle the situation with BYU having the opportunity to qualify for nationals on Saturday until the day before regionals started. Ultimately, they decided that they were going to require BYU to play any seeding games on Sunday. They moved them from the 3 seed at the tournament to the 5 seed. And BYU ended up losing to both Oregon and Washington in pool play. So they did not qualify on Saturday, though they probably almost certainly would have, although, the way Western Washington played, and we'll get to that, maybe not, would have finished top 2 if they were in that 3 seed spot. So ultimately, BYU not given the chance to go to nationals and have to deal with the pre-quarters and quarter scenarios that might have popped up had they gotten out of pool play. So what that meant is that there were 6 spots for 5 really good teams and 1 next up team. And that next up team was Utah. They looked the part. They were solid. They're probably going to win a game or 2 at nationals. That's how good the Northwest is. And the big story, though, in the women's side is that Western Washington upsets UBC, who's probably going to be the 1 seed at nationals or the 2. And that's, quite the shock result. UBC did go on to win the region, but Keith, wow, Western Washington showing a ceiling that I don't know that we knew that they had.
It's still stunning. I mean, I look at their results and everything else looks about like, I think, what we've come to know from Chaos. They lose a close game to UVic. They're pretty close with UVic's level. They beat Utah by a little bit. That's kind of what you'd expect. They lose to Washington, Oregon. That's par for the course. And then there's a 13-11 win over UBC. at regionals. Like,
Crazy.
yeah, I know there was basically infinite bids. Like, you would have had to fall down a mine shaft to not get a bid to nationals at Northwest Regionals. But UBC said they were playing for real, right? Like, they were out there trying. They knew that their number one seed was potentially on the line. I think that they're very likely to be the 2, maybe even the 3 going into nationals. So they knew there was something to play for, and Washington just was on fire. That's what I've heard, is they basically played a perfect game, and UBC just couldn't do anything to take them out of it. So that's how you show your ceiling, right? Just literally go out there and dunk on the best team in the division in your area.
Pretty awesome. Over on the men's side, Oregon winning the region fairly comfortably. No surprise there. And the question was really what's going to happen with that second bid. Washington, Oregon State, Utah, all the top seeds in their pools all go 2-0 in pool play. And then Oregon State able to defeat Washington 13-11 in their semifinal. Oregon over Utah 13-11 in the opposite semi. 13-11 win for Oregon in the game to go. And then in the backdoor game to go, Oregon State drops down, plays UBC, who upset Washington big time, 13-8. And Oregon State easily defeating UBC 13-9. So the two teams out of Oregon qualifying maybe shouldn't come as a surprise, Keith, but I do think there were a lot of questions, and I didn't pick Oregon State.
Yeah, but not like a surprise, but I think we knew that there was a lot on the table at this tournament, and because of that, there were a lot of high pressure games and a lot of close scores. You look even back to pool play. Winning your pool became such a big advantage. So in pools, the last 2 pools where you had Oregon State versus UBC and Utah versus UVic, those turned out to be pretty big games and very close. Like, you weren't exactly playing an elimination game at that point, but you were definitely playing a very important game during pool play, which not a lot of teams get at regionals, where they're playing teams that they're like fairly well matched with. And so you get a lot of close scores at this tournament. We saw comebacks, we saw drama, and ultimately I think the backdoor grind was just too much for UBC. You got to go through their path was Utah. They beat them 11-9. Washington, they beat them 13-8, but I bet that wasn't easy. And then you got to play an Oregon State team that's only played 1 game. And that's after they played more games on Saturday too. So there was a tough road for any of these backdoor teams to come back from. So Oregon State able to close out the deal. And I think they looked like the second best team. They're definitely a legitimate nationals team by any measure.
Definitely. Pittsburgh and Penn State qualify this weekend. There were questions about, is Penn State going to be able to hold on? They've clearly been the best team so far this season. And they defeat Ohio State in semis 15-11. And then when they get back into the game to go, it's 15-5 beatdown. So no questions there. Penn State, clearly the second best team in the OV.
I'm curious what they can do at nationals. I'm not even sure what exactly to expect from them. I don't know where you probably seeded them. Probably at what a 4, maybe a last 3 seed, or otherwise I'd expect them to be on the 4 line.
No, they'll be a little higher than that. But based on the projected final rankings post regionals, they are likely to come in as the 16 seed, ahead of Oregon State, WashU, Ottawa, and Michigan.
Interesting. I'm not exactly sure what their ceiling is. I think they had a very strong regular season. We saw some compelling results from them. I think beating Ohio State so soundly is a good score in their book. But they're a team that we don't know what they'll do at the national level, really. This is unfamiliar territory for these players.
They were a point or two behind a lot of the other good nationals teams. They went to Easterns. They lost to UAH, Brown, SLO, NC State. They even lost to Tufts. Their only wins coming against UNC Charlotte and UNC Wilmington. But I would say, they're going to have a chance to get to pre-quarters, depending on how the pools shake out.
Well, based on how we're thinking that everything's going to work out, everybody's going to have a chance at pre-quarters pretty much.
Ooh, no kidding. I mean, you look at the bottom of the men's division this year, and it's The bottom 4 seeds projected are Oregon State, Wash U, an actually good Metro East team in Ottawa, and Michigan, the last seed of the tournament. And the last seed of the tournament has legit, like, high quality players on it. These are not pushover 5 seeds. Like, those teams are going to have opportunities to upset teams in front of them, and that is not always the case. But that's what happens when not only do you get a good qualifier out of the Metro East, but you also just don't have these kind of surprise upsets where, like, a lower team is taking a spot from a higher team. These are just the best teams all made nationals this year.
Yeah, everybody, except American University. Come on, they're right there in the AC women's. They're right there.
I mean, you could say the same thing about the women's division, right? Colorado State, Georgia, Utah, and SUNY Binghamton likely to be your bottom 4 seeds. And, like, SUNY Binghamton has won games at nationals the last couple of years.
Yeah, you're telling me you want to draw Quincy Booth and Fiona Cashin or Jolie Krebs? I don't think so.
I don't think so. Any other notes from regionals this weekend, Keith?
Well, we could quickly, the Atlantic Coast, not too much, surprises. UNC in both divisions, comfortably in the women's division. Though, shout out to American University making it to the final. Love to see it. Definitely a first time. And in the men's division, UNC Charlotte, ended up being the final challenger to NC State, dropping down from that top game. UNC Charlotte getting the upset over UNC Wilmington in the backdoor game to go to the game to go. They beat them 10-9, pretty exciting game, but it really just gassed them. Having it, just like we talked about with UBC in the Northwest, too tough a bracket to play your way through, and then they let UNC Wilmington get back in that game. They were up like 8-4 at half. UNC Wilmington storms back in the second half, forces it to Universe, and UNC Charlotte, I think, expended too much energy in that second half, and so NC State kind of rolled them over in the final, or in the backdoor final.
Yeah, I think NC State was going to kind of kill whoever they played in that game. They were a step above the rest of the competition in that region at the end of the day. All right, Keith, I want to talk about seeding. By this time next week, we should have final seeds for both D3 and D1. But I spent a couple hours this morning taking a look at my predicted seedings and posting them for the D1 college championships. And I want to draw your attention to, again, we don't have the official rankings, but the projected rankings, which are likely to be almost perfect, if not exactly correct, have Colorado in the men's division as the number 1 seed, as the number 1 ranked team, I should say. Okay, so here's the problem with Colorado, Keith. This is the weakest number 1 ranked team at the end of a college season in as long as I can remember. It's kind of shocking that they're even in the spot. They have head-to-head losses to UNC, UMass, Pitt, SLO, and Oregon. Their best win is against Oregon. They did not win any big tournaments. They did not make the finals of many big tournaments. And it seems to be a combination of losing close to the good teams and beating the mid-tier teams by a lot that has kind of added up to them getting to this number 1 spot in the rankings. The problem is, what do you do with them from a seeding perspective then? Because I think it's straightforward enough to bump them down behind UNC. I believe UNC will get the number 1 overall seed. Combination of where they are in the rankings, which is going to be number 2, we project, and they have a head-to-head win over Colorado. So that's pretty straightforward. They're also the 3-time defending national champs. But what do you do with Colorado when they have literal head-to-head losses against most of the teams that are going to be seeded in the top 6? Do you put them in the 2 and ignore the fact that Georgia won Easterns? Do you put them in the 3 and ignore the fact that UMass soundly beat them this season? What about Pitt? What about SLO? I think it's fair enough to say they should go ahead of Oregon because they split games against Oregon, but I don't know what you do with this team, Keith.
I feel like I've honestly kind of lost a sense of how USA Ultimate decides the seedings. I feel like last year I was off, and that they typically relied on the algorithm pretty heavily, and said, these head-to-head results are fed into the algorithm anyway. Like we don't need to overweight them. But in this scenario, like it seems highly implausible that they're going to put Colorado at number one. And so, yeah, then you end up in that, like, well, you put them next to Georgia, they lost to Georgia. You put them next to UMass, they lost to UMass. Like you can push them down pretty far. So it is a tricky one. How are they? I think that in past years, like if we were doing this same conversation, you put the same data set in front of me 2 years ago, and I would think that Colorado was probably going to get the two, and they would mostly disregard a lot of those head-to-heads. But now I'm not so sure, especially if they end up leaning on alternative pieces of information, using those head-to-heads, looking at power rankings, taking team feedback. If they're starting to look at other stuff because the algorithm is not differentiating very much between the teams, then yeah, I think we could see them move. And there's a comment right now for random draw. What if it works at club again? I think it's gonna be time to bring it to college. I'm ready.
I wouldn't complain. I mean, I think there's enough kind of lack of clarity. I mean, to be fair, you'd still have a problem doing random draw for Colorado because, like, do they get a 1 seed? Do they get a pool 1 seed, or do they go into the first bucket to be drawn into the 2 seeds? I don't think that's obvious. Now, here's the thing, right? Historically, USA Ultimate relies heavily on the rankings, but this is the most clear case I maybe ever seen of the rankings deviating from the eye test and the head-to-head results. Like, I guess Colorado, you might argue that they had a more consistent season, but with losses to basically all of the good teams and wins against almost none of them, I just don't see how you can reward them with a 1 seed in a pool. They don't deserve it. Like, beating Texas by a lot and getting rankings points from that, to me, just doesn't outweigh the fact that they've lost to all of these other top teams. So ultimately, in my predictions, I put them at the 5 behind Pittsburgh, but there's definitely a case for them to go behind SLO as well. I really just don't know what they're going to do. I think that it's going to end up being somewhere difficult to justify in that 2 to 7 range. And it really could go anywhere in there. And I don't really know how I guess they'll rely on team feedback. I kind of went with what felt right, as opposed to having like a clear, because there is no clear way to determine, I think, where they should go. I mean, they're ranked 100 points ahead of SLO, 150 points ahead of Pitt in the rankings, but they have head-to-head losses to both of them. So what do you want to weigh more?
Well, so at least this is a distinction without a difference when it comes to Pitt and Colorado if they end up 4 and 5, because ostensibly the 4 and 5 seeds are purely for visual appeal. There's no substantive difference between the two teams. There's a small scheduling difference in what order you play the other teams in Pool D, but otherwise they're mostly the same.
Tough calls this year, I think. But as my projected top 4 seeds in the men's division, UNC, Georgia, UMass, Pitt, with UMass not really getting dinged too much for losing that regional final. And on the women's side, I've got Vermont at the number 1 seed. They'll definitely get the 1 seed. They are number 2 in the rankings and beat UBC heads up. UBC at the 2, Carleton at the 3, Oregon at the 4. So, any arguments there, Keith?
Am I misreading that UNC's the 5 seed in the women's division?
You are not, and arguably they could be the 6 seed. They are ranked behind Stanford in the rankings. But if you're wondering, how UNC can't really go much higher, they lost to Vermont and Carleton.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at their resume, trying to figure out what it is that sank them so much in the rankings, and it's it's basically like games they won by 7 that they didn't hit the blowout marker on. Twice with Duke,
Yeah,
13-6. This is all according to Frisbee rankings.
yeah,
NC State they
that's
beat 9-6. That's a poor result, but there are a lot of edge of blowout games on this resume that are hurting this team, and that would be kind of a sad way for them to end up as the 2 seed in a pool.
Well, I mean, you could make a case, I guess, to have them ahead of Oregon as a 1 seed just based on their pedigree, but again, it doesn't matter in that 4 or 5 slot. I actually moved them ahead of Stanford in the rankings, despite a lack of a head-to-head result, because of exactly what you're describing, which is that they're losing points in the postseason specifically because of like a blowout 13-7 game that didn't quite do enough to get dropped from the rankings. And they clearly have a better resume and pedigree than Stanford. I mean, UNC has lost to the 1 and 3 seeds, Vermont and Carleton, projected. Stanford lost to BYU, Oregon, Carleton, Washington, and Vermont. So, like, you can't realistically look at those 2 resumes and say, oh, yeah, Stanford clearly deserves to go ahead of UNC because UNC didn't win by enough against some terrible team they crushed at regionals. I mean, this is a weakness of the algorithm that we should all be aware of, and they should be aware of when they do these seedings.
Tell it to Notre Dame.
Yeah, I mean, data is data. You got to use it. It's different to win a game 12-11 or 12-10. If you're winning 13-7, like, obviously that game is not close. They have to have some bright line. I get it.
Yeah, this is the same thing we talked about when the Notre Dame thing happened. It's like, on the field, does there feel like there's a big difference between winning a game 15-7 or 15-8 or 15-6 or whatever? No, but the math makes them very different. So that to me is an actual weakness in the algorithm because UNC in theory the teams that are scoring better than UNC probably didn't have these games that were 1 or 2 points closer. They were probably beating the teams that were the level of the teams that we're talking about, the Dukes that UNC faced. They probably beat them by more. So there's a case to be made that like maybe we shouldn't ignore that. But it is weird to me to look over and see UNC as a 5 seed. That is not. If you had just asked me, I might even have said on the record already that I thought UNC was going to end up probably with a top 3 or 4 seed. I might have said that during our field pass. But
there's no way they go above 4. I don't think there's any question because they lost to Carleton. If you want to make a case for them to go at 4 ahead of Oregon instead of at 5, I would listen to it, but there's no chance. The rankings are king. Now, Steve Sullivan in the chat says, I think it's way more likely Colorado ends up at number 1 or number 2 than at number 6. USAU likes to avoid having to make any, quote, subjective decision. They will lean on the algorithm and wash their hands of any bias accusations. I basically think he might be right, but I think it would be a disservice to the seeding to not react to the reality of the results. Colorado does not have the resume of a number 1 or a number 2 seed. They simply don't. They are 1 and 6, I think, against the top 7 teams that are going to be in the rest of the rankings. How should they get rewarded for that? That would be the wrong thing to do.
Well, we're going to see what USAU decides over the next week or so. And I could see them if they were going to take one piece of outside data and use it. If they use team feedback, that still kind of lets them wash their hands a little bit and say, "Hey, the teams picked this, so it's not our fault that it looks different than the rankings." Maybe that's the direction that they go, but we'll see what they end up deciding. Very few upsets, like we said at regionals, but a lot of these top teams played a pretty competitive season. Now that lack of upsets does not extend to semi-pro. There have been some big upsets in the semi-pro scene.
Let's talk a little
maybe
semi-pro
biggest of
small
all.
ball, Keith.
For sure. Maybe biggest of all, Charlie. Atlanta Hustle over the New York Empire. They end the streak. Wow, what a stunning turn of events. Because Atlanta did not look the part a week ago, and now they're the conquerors of the Empire.
It's hard to win on the road in the UFA. And the Empire are not the same team that they have been the last couple of seasons. They're just not. And they got thoroughly outplayed by Atlanta, and this was not really a close game. Empire were not generating break chances. When they had them, they were not punching them in. They looked discombobulated with their D-line offense. Justin Burnett was a beast. And look, I mean, I think it's great for the league to have the Empire take this loss, especially coming off of Atlanta's disastrous week 1 game. This is a huge bounce back for them, and a game that probably a lot of people chalked up to them losing. And now they're 1-1 and maybe going to still have a chance to play for a number 1 seed in the South.
Yeah, the numbers 1 for 17, 6% break percentage for the Empire. Yikes, that is terrible. And then 45% on Hux. I think on Swing Pass they said that this is basically like one of the worst deep throwing teams in the entire league right now. You're telling me that a team with Jack Williams and Ben Yott can't figure out a way to complete a huck? I mean, Ben Yott's been pretty quiet through 2 games. He's been held in check. This is a guy who was an MVP. I'm still pretty stunned. I mean, you knew it was going to be tough when Elliot Chartok has a perfunctory centering pass bounce off of his chest directly into the hands of Trenton Spinks for Callahan in like the most gifted Callahan of all. Like, might as well have pulled out the white tablecloth and set up the cutlery for Trenton Spinks to gobble that up, because that was as easy as it's going to be. That's when you knew it wasn't going to be New York's night.
Yeah. 15 turnovers to the Hustle's 8. It's just a very un-Empire-like performance. And look, New York is going to be fine. They're going to bounce back. I still expect them to be the top seed in the East, but it is not such an easy task for them anymore, especially against the other top teams in the league. Here is the thing. Atlanta has always been a good matchup for New York. They have the physicality and size to give them problems. They should have beaten them. The Hustle should have beaten the Empire in the playoffs. Was it now 3 years ago or 2 years ago? I have a hard time keeping track of the seasons, but Atlanta came up here to New York and in the mega Atlantic Conference season and should have won the game. And it took a miraculous play from Ben Yott and a miraculous play from Jeff Babbitt to prevent that from happening. But now they go down there and we could see exactly why the Hustle are a problem for them. They have size, and let's be honest, the Empire has lost a lot of size. Not only did they lose Jeff Babbitt, they also lost John Lithio. Both of those guys, big bodies. And Atlanta playing above the rim with guys like Brett Holzmeyer, who we're looking at here, and Burnett, who was fantastic against Ben Yott in particular. So I think it makes sense to me. Atlanta kind of having a sleepy spot on the road to open their season. Looking ahead to this game, New York going to have a hard time on the road, perhaps against the top teams. Well, how will they do against the Breeze on the road? Going to be interesting.
Any of these other results stand out to you? You get Seattle with a road win against Oakland. Nice to see Seattle get a win on the road. It's the thing I've been criticizing them for. And then a lot of people talking about that DC Philly score line. Very in favor of DC.
Yeah, I mean, Philly was awful to start the season last year. I remember they played New York, I think, in their first game of the year at New York and were horrendous. So I'm not necessarily super worried about the Phoenix. I think that they're just a much worse team than the Breeze. Philly's still going to have a chance to get the last playoff spot.
I guess if you're going to be a team named Phoenix, like you got to bury yourself at the beginning of the year, because otherwise there's no ashes to rise from, right? If you just you got to come out and start at the bottom.
Yeah. Salt Lake, I just want to note, going to 3-0. They go on a back-to-back road trip Friday and Saturday against San Diego and LA. They win both of those games. They have another back-to-back road trip, not this weekend, but the following, against Oakland and Colorado. So that is going to be super tough. If they can win those games, I mean, you start to think about them. I mean, they should lose that game to Colorado on the road. But if they win that game, I think that you're looking at a very clear favorite in the West at that point. Tough schedule.
Let's jump over to the Premier Ultimate League, where I'm not sure what I would say is the lead story here. I guess it's DC. They get another 6-goal win over Raleigh, which for them is like paltry. 6 goals. Like, come on. Are you even trying? You'd be a team by 6 goals. But Raleigh's obviously good. So DC still, though, able to take care of Billy, double them up in the course of the game. You also have Philadelphia. 22
you got
to
that
7
Surge jersey
on
okay.
the road. I do. I'm rocking the Surge jersey. Charlie, I'm raised by Atlanta, but technically I was born in Philly. Let it be known that there's a little part of me that reps Philly.
Even I did not know that.
Yeah, I may have been raised in the South, but I was born in Philly. So repping the Surge, and I want to be on a winning team. Tired of the way the Falcons treat me, and went to that Knicks game.
Look,
and the Knicks blow that lead. Like, I need some W's. So I'm here with Philly, and they're crushing people. They're crushing people.
Philly and DC are way out in front in the PUL. And I think we're on the collision course for that to be the final. Should be great. Championship weekend is going to be in Philly. DC people are going to come up. It's a short drive. Does anybody else even have a chance? I mean, I guess I would listen to you if you wanted to give me some song and dance about Minnesota, but I really don't think anybody's got a prayer. Can maybe Raleigh, when they're at full strength, can do something like they did last year, but these are not been promising results for the Radiants as they again get crushed by DC 13-7. 7 goals, the lowest scoring team. They scored as many goals as Austin. What's going on? This team won tough tournament last year.
I'm counting on that postseason magic, but they got to get there, and that could be a tough task. I mean, New York gets a 19-11 win over an Indy team that, personally, disappointed in the way we've seen Indy play this year. New York, minus some of their key players, still able to win that game handily. Nice bounce back for Minnesota, but yeah, I don't know exactly what to make of New York. Like, maybe they are going to be that good if they get it all together, but this is a good win for them because you go on anytime you go on the road and play really well in the league. I think that's a great sign. But disappointing showing for Indy so far for me this season. I thought that they might be able to take a big step forward after last year.
The last game to talk about, Western Ultimate League, just one game this past weekend. Colorado hosting Seattle. They win at 22-17. So right now, Colorado's sitting at 3-2 at the top of the Northwest. Seattle at 2-3, and Utah down at 1-3. So looking like Colorado's got the inside track to closing out the top seed in the Northwest Conference.
Expand champion. Everybody goes to championship weekend. Let's do it. Play in. Add the play in. There's too much parity in this league.
Wouldn't hate it with the way this league plays out, right?
For real. Let's see it happen. I mean, it should be a championship weekend. Should be pretty exciting anyway, though, because there definitely is any given Sunday kind of feel to the Western Ultimate League. So I'm in, but wow, Colorado has looked impressive. Ari Nelson, Bailey Shigley getting the job done for this Colorado team, and there's nobody I would count out completely at this point, but I don't know if I'd still mark them the favorites, but they certainly are obviously well within the championship contender tier at the top of the Northwest right now.
I feel like it's going to come down to like where the games are played. Like I think, did Colorado play at Seattle yet this season? Did that happen? Yes. Seattle won 2015 just last weekend. And then they swap, and now it's a 5-goal win for Colorado. Neutral field, that's a coin flip game. Now, unfortunately for Seattle, it's not going to be a neutral field in the postseason because they're playing it in Colorado. So I think a great chance for the Alpenglow because they're playing at home. Altitude advantage, and although that didn't help the Denver Nuggets last night. Yikes.
Don't even.
So,
gosh. My bankroll.
And that's WL for this week. So question of the week time. Here it comes. It's from Tanner in the Discord. Should Cameron Brock make the Ultimate Hall of Fame? And as kind of a tack-on question there, will a primarily semi-pro player ever make the Ultimate Hall of Fame? What do you think, Keith?
All right, two questions here. Cam Brock? No, I would say no. Just not like you'd make the UFA Hall of Fame, but like this is someone that, like no MVPs, no titles, even within that environment. I could see, if he goes on to continue to be like somebody who's operating in like a contributor role, the combination of his player resume and being like a forerunner plus contributions. But that on that question, I think very clear no to me. Sometimes it feels like Hall of Fames in general are too permissive. I don't know if I'd quite say that USA Ultimate or that not the USA Ultimate, that the Ultimate Hall of Fame is there yet. Now, will somebody as a semi-pro primarily player make it? Well, that depends on the longevity of the leagues. The UFA is in a good place now, so they're starting to get to that point where you start to recognize pioneers in the league, people who contribute in the league. But we're still right now at a point where most of the people who are the best players in the UFA are the best players in Club Ultimate too. So, like, maybe someone like a Matt Smith is an exception. Like maybe he falls in that kind of Cam Brock category, but for the most part, the crossover's there. So it's hard to beat. There aren't really players who are at that level in the UFA yet, and the PUL and WL just don't have the longevity yet. So I think it's definitely possible in the future, but it feels like a distant future to me right now. 20 years, because you got to give time not only for the things to happen, but then to be recognized. So I think we're talking 10, 20 years. Maybe you start to see contributor stuff like people who are pioneers in the leagues. If the PUL and WL are around in 5-10 years, maybe you're looking at our original commissioners, founders, etc., being people who are getting the look.
Sure. There's just no way right now that somebody who's basically only been good in semi-pro can possibly get into the Hall of Fame. Like Cameron Brock has never made a Team USA. The top level of competition in the country is club. It just is. Not only is the overall player pool clearly better, but players care more. They train for longer, and many of the very best players in the country simply do not play semi-pro at all. If you're not making World Games teams and Team USA, I mean, you would have to be so exceptionally amazing in a semi-pro league and decide, maybe somebody plays only semi-pro and they never play club and they never try out for Team USA and whatnot. I could see it. I'm not ruling out anybody ever, but you look at even people who have been like multi-time MVPs in the league, like Ben Yacht, and I don't think Ben Yacht is like a lock Hall of Famer, and he has made Team USA. He could become a Hall of Famer. He could. It's possible. It's still early enough for me to not be able to say with certainty, but if his career ended today, he wouldn't get in.
I mean, right now they're not even listing your semi-pro accolades in your profile, right? Like,
no. Now, like, to be fair,
let's get to that point.
People who run the hall
doing it primarily on that.
Yeah, the people who run the hall are all people who are like in their 40s, 50s, 60s who are only no club, basically. Now, Dave Blau has helped coach the Empire, so it's not like they're specifically anti-semi-pro or something like that, but you just have to do more to get into the Hall of Fame. Like Cam Brock should have absolutely no chance of getting into the ultimate Hall of Fame. He could definitely get into a UFA Hall of Fame and would be probably a first balloter. But has he even ever been the best player on the field at like championship weekend in a matchup? I don't think so.
It is more likely to me that someone starts a UFA or semi-pro Hall of Fame than it is that'll happen before someone makes it in primarily for their performance in semi-pro.
I agree. Steve Sullivan says the way the nomination voting process happens right now, no chance we see a primarily semi-pro player, at least for a while. It's only club people voting at the moment. And there's no reason that should change in the short term. It's just that the level isn't there yet. It's gotten better. The top teams are close to the top teams of their club counterpart, often because they're literally mostly the same teams and the same players. But it depends on the league and depends on the team. So that is going to do it for this edition of Deep Look. Keith, by this time next week, we should have the seedings for D3 and D1. So we're going to get you ready for the D3 College Championships and all of the streaming access that you'll have as a subscriber. And then D1 right around the corner. I'm so excited for College Nationals. Sign up for your subscription today at ultiworld.com/subscribe. We're going to take more mailbag questions from our folks in the Discord in our live Out the Back bonus segment that's going to happen in Discord in about 5 minutes. So head over there and join us. For Keith Rayner, I'm Charlie Eisenhood saying so long, and we'll talk to you next week right here on Deep Look. 500.
Hey, Charlie and Keith. I'm on my honeymoon, but when Sue contacted me to say that there was something really important that needed doing, I dropped everything to make sure that I could help congratulate Deep Look on its 500th episode. 500 of these already? Jesus. Congrats on finding 500 different ways to read Score Reporter every week. Congratulations on 500 episodes, and here's to as many more as you can do before AI replaces all of us. Congrats.
Hey everyone, this is Tina Booth in my backyard in Amherst, Massachusetts. I'm here to congratulate Charlie and Keith and the Deep Look staff for 500 episodes of their podcast. I also want to congratulate anyone who has been on the show before. I've been lucky enough to be on it a few times, and I always love being asked my opinion because I have quite a few. Even though I don't agree with you a lot, like I think currently you and I probably agree on 75-80% of what's going on. There's years when we're closer to 95, and then there's those years where Charlie and Keith are just wrong. But anyway, best of luck for the next 500. Thanks so much for all you do. We really appreciate it.
People just love us being wrong, Keith. That's really what it is. We should just have a podcast where
they love
we
it.
Try to give bad takes.
Hit the thumbs up button for every time you want us to be wrong. Go ahead. Slap it.